It's your girl, Professor Cinephile, and I know it's been a while, but I'm back. Um, and I'm back with a bang because the film I have to review for you today is one of the greatest films I've seen in a very long time. I am talking about none other than Sinners, the new film by Ryan Coogler, starring Michael B. Jordan, Delroy Lindo, and a great cast of wonderful people. Oh, where do I begin? First of all, spoiler alert, there are going to be a lot of spoilers in this review. So if you have not seen the film, and you don't want it to be spoiled, come back after you've seen it, and then you can figure out, how what I'm saying aligns with what you saw. Um, I'll also say that this is going to be a longer one. Usually I try to keep my reviews to 10 minutes or less, but this is probably going to be podcast length. So get comfortable, buckle in. If you need to run it at 1.5 times, that's fine. But I have a lot to say about this film. I also want to say that I am approaching this as an Afrocentric scholar who studies film, as a person who has developed Afrocentric film theory, as a person who has created frameworks for analyzing Black cinema or films that feature Black people. That's where I'm coming from the historian perspective. I'm coming from the Black studies perspective. I'm coming from all of those things. So this is not going to be just a review. It's like, oh, I really liked it and you should go see it. I'm going to give you some of my deeper thoughts. Okay. Um, so I want to break this down a few ways. So first of all, I'll start with what is this film about? You can look up the plot and the summary, all you want, story of twins who come across some vampires as they're trying to set up a business in the Mississippi Delta, right? Cool, cool, cool. Um, the thesis of this film, however, is that white people are culture vultures and they steal everything from Black people and pass it off as their own because they recognize that we harness a flavor that they never can. And it really looks at this notion that white people will steal from Black people and then destroy Black people, either by killing us or by forcing us into assimilation into trying to be more like them. That's the thesis. That is what this film is about. It is billed as a horror film, as a Southern Gothic film. So if you're not familiar with what Southern Gothic is, I learned about it in high school when I took a class called Southern Literature. Southern Gothic focuses on fantasy. It focuses on things that are grotesque. It focuses on the macabre, things that are out of the ordinary, things that are spiritual, a lot of metaphysical elements into it, things that we cannot understand and cannot explain, right? From an Afrocentric perspective, we recognize that there are things in this world that we cannot explain and that we don't need to understand. They just exist, and we accept them as such. And that is part of African tradition. Now, throughout this, you're going to hear me refer to African people. And that is, I'm speaking to people across the diaspora. That is how I talk about people, whether you are from Brooklyn or Port-au-Prince or Lagos, you're all African to me. Okay. So that is the thesis of the film. And if you go into the film understanding that that is what this film is about, then you're good, right? And part of the thing that I was thinking about is that Black horror generally uh, creates this idea that whiteness is our greatest horror, right? White people are our biggest boogeymen. And we've seen that in films like Get Out by Jordan Peele. We've seen that in Blackula. We've seen that in a number of films where white people are the real horror for Black people. I kind of want us to move away from that, and there are some films that have done that, but it's hard to move away from that when that is the truth, right? There's no boogeyman that we can come across, no spiritual figure, no, killer in the night or in our dreams like Freddy Krueger that comes close to the horrors of whiteness and racism, right? So it makes sense that that becomes a theme for a lot of Black horror literature and films, right? But in this sense, it is very clear, that Ryan Coogler is making that statement that not only is whiteness the greatest horror, It is the most destructive thing in the lives of African people throughout centuries, ever since they made their way back to the continent. And I say that because, right, everything comes from Africa. Um, they have sought to terrorize us and destroy us and take all of our resources, material, cultural, all those kinds of things. And so that is a theme that comes up in so much of our literature, our music, our cinema, and all of our creative products, right? This idea that we survive even though they have tried to take everything from us. And every time they take something from us, we create something new. And we create it based on our cultural traditions. And so that is also throughout this film. Um, Let me talk about the horror elements. So if you're new here, you probably don't know that my two favorite genres of film are horror and blaxploitation, both of which are present in this film. And if you didn't pick that up, I'm gonna help you out. So the horror elements, it doesn't really have a whole lot of horror. I just, they've built it as such, and that's a bit disappointing, but I understand why they do that. With Jordan Peele, and the success he had with films like Get Out. Um, there's an interest in Black horror, and I love it, right? I love that for us because we are capable of doing so many types of films, and we have been doing so many types of films. So it's not that this is a new thing for us, but it's about what gets greenlit and what gets the support of Hollywood and the mainstream, right? So I'm not surprised that they are pushing it as a horror film, but it's not really that. I would say about maybe a third of the film has horror elements to it, and even that, it's not too bad. They're vampires, right? There are vampires there. There are vampires that eat other people and bite into necks. There's a bit of blood and stuff. My one of my critiques of the films is that the visual effects could use some improvement, but it is what it is. In this day and age, I actually don't expect much creativity in the way of special effects. We rely too heavily on technology and all these computers and things like that, that we lose a lot of um, the grit of, like, say, the horror from the 70s and 80s, right? Those horror fans, we know that that was like our golden age of horror. And part of what makes those horror films cult classics is how gritty they are and how, like, you're like, come on, like, go watch The Evil Dead, for example, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you're scared and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be freaked out, trust me, that is probably the smallest part of the film. This is actually a film about, it's a history. Like, it's a historical film. It is a film that is looking at the experiences of African Americans in the Jim Crow South. And, I'm one of those people, I get very annoyed when I hear like younger folks saying, I'm so tired of Black trauma porn and oh, they make her slave movies and things like that. And my response is always, you all don't read enough, so you need these films. The only way you're going to learn it is not being taught in your K through 12 high school. And then when you're going to college, how many of you are actually taking African American studies classes or history classes? You're not. So how else are you going to learn this stuff? We have to put it in the films. We know, again, my dissertation is on this, and I talk about the importance of film. We are the original filmmakers. I talk about how the first moving image comes out of Africa, comes out of Kemet, right? So this is what we do. We are visual people, we are oral history people, right? So there's definitely that oral history element that I really appreciate that Coogler uses. He uses it via a narrator. And this narrator is kind of giving you history lessons. Now, it's a little sledgehammery with the message kind of thing, but I think that he does weave it in a way that helps the audience understand what's going on. Because this film, it is explanatory. It is here to say, and this is the thing that happens a lot of times with Black films, is that when you're given the green light and you're given the money, there is often this sense that I've got to teach people everything. I've got to pack everything into this film. And I'm not saying that he did all of that, but I think that Coogler recognized that he had a very unique opportunity to expose people to and educate people about the Black Southern Gothic and the African American Southern Gothic, and how our people navigated this, right? So the film is set in 1932. What happened in 1929, right? One of the most devastating economic fallouts in the United States, right? And of course, African Americans were affected the worst, but they were not the only ones, right? many racialized groups had to deal with that. Lower class white folks had to deal with some of that. So to kind of dive into that and explore that was really important. We see people as sharecroppers. We see people picking cotton still, right? Would have liked him to mention the boll weevil thing that happened and the effect that it ended up happening, that boll weevil infestation that happened and kind of gutted the cotton industry. But okay, you can't put everything in these films, right? Um, so this idea that there are black people picking cotton and talking about they have to meet a quota, right? Because they're sharecroppers. If you don't understand what sharecropping is basically black people were working on plots of land for white people that were owned by white people, and they had to produce certain amount of product, in this case cotton, in order to be paid. They were often underpaid, severely underpaid. They were often in debt. There was a whole lot of stuff. Sharecropping life was not easy for our people, and it was not much different from being enslaved and having to work on plantations. So he dives into that. He wants you to see that. He wants you to know that picking cotton didn't end with slavery, right? He also has a scene where there is a chain gang, these incarcerated men who are digging ditches, right? What's important about this, and this is me dropping another history lesson, is that the reason today that people who have a felony are disenfranchised from voting goes back to felony disenfranchisement of Black men. There's a scene where there's a line where Delroy Lindo's character, Delta Slim, tells a story about how he and some men were, kind of hanging around, and he said they got busted for vagrancy. This is a throw to the vagrancy laws. Black men were often incarcerated and charged with felonies for being vagrant. Now, what does vagrant mean? It means hanging outside and being idle. Well, why did they get arrested for that? Because many states enacted laws that Black people were not allowed to not work, right? This affected men and women. And it got even worse as we get further into the mid-century, mid-20th century, because white families didn't have enough people working as domestics. And so if you were a Black woman, for example, and you did not have a job, you could go to jail for not having a job because white people needed you to work for them, right? So this idea that these men were busted for vagrancy, that is the beginning of felony disenfranchisement from voting. They would arrest them to make sure that they could never vote. And so as we're coming out of Reconstruction and we had this whole Gilded Age during the Reconstruction, and African American men were able to secure positions in government, and white folks did not like that. Okay. We also need to remember this is about 16 or 17 years after The Birth of the Nation is released, D.W. Griffin's racist call to reinvigorate the KKK, right? The KKK existed in the 19th century, but they had gone dormant due to the laws during Reconstruction that suppressed them and actually protected Black people. Some people don't know that there was a Civil Rights Act that protected Black people against the Klan. That got thrown away as they abandoned Reconstruction. But when that film came back, it was basically a rallying cry to reinvigorate the Klan. And so we're about maybe 16 years, almost a generation after the Klan is back in full force. And so the Klan exists in this film, okay? And they exist in a subtle way. Initially, you have a man who, these two characters, Stack and Smoke, and I'll get into characters in a bit, but they are buying a sawmill from him, and he's asserting to them that there's no Klan in the area, right? Because they're still pretty undercover. They absolutely, he is like the grand wizard of the local Klan chapter, right? So he's lying, but it also shows, God, there's so much in this movie. It also shows that green is the main color that these people cared about. Ultimately, at the end of the day, black, white, brown, yellow, red. Green is the strongest color in this country, right? So as long as he was getting money, he didn't actually care. Cool. All right. So what do we know about these? That's the setting. So that's the setting that we're in. We're in 1932. We're in the Mississippi Delta. Many people are struggling to get by, but there are people that do own businesses. They have set up ways to take care of their families, and their community exists, right? This is about 10 years or so after the Tulsa massacre that took place in Greenwood, where an entire community had been wiped out by racist white people. coming in and destroying their businesses and killing people and all that kind of stuff, right? So we're about 10 years after this. There's other massacres that also take place that we don't necessarily learn about. The Colfax massacre, I'm thinking about. Um, a lot of white tyranny is what we're talking about. So that sets the stage for this, right? So, who do you have in this story? You have the Smokestack brothers, two brothers, nicknames Smoke and Stack. Okay, Smoke is the older brother. They're both played by Michael B. Jordan. Honestly, the best I've ever seen him. I've never thought that Michael B. Jordan was the greatest actor, but you don't have to be the greatest actor to be effective, right? You have to fill the roles in the same way Halle Berry fills roles, right? Okay. Um, Michael has, has a look, he has a presence. He was great as Killmonger. He was great in Creed. That's kind of what we're going for with him. But this time, Michael had to dig in his acting bag, like dig, dig, dig. And he plays these twins. So, first of all, you don't often see that because it's not easy to do, aside from the visual effects and the CGI and all the stuff that has to go through. Um, Even the best actors and actresses struggle with playing two different people. And when you see people do that, you know that they're actually doing something really good. So Smoke is the older of the twins. He's the elder of the twins. He is mostly depicted wearing blue. He is the more business minded. He's a bit more stoic. He's kind of like the big brother, trying to keep them together, keep them out of trouble, staying kind of on the straight and narrow, but also trying to grow their business and their ability to take care of each other and the people in their communities. Stack is more of the slick talking kind of, wheeling and dealing type, gambler type, the one that gets into a lot of trouble, probably the more physical brother when it comes to those kinds of things. Although we do see Smoke shooting people, and kind of maintaining this reputation. We know that they are from this area, but that they left. We know that they are veterans. They've been around the world. We know that they ended up going to Chicago. Mississippi to Chicago was a major line, but it's also a shout out to Emmett Till. And there's a lot of homage paid throughout this film, right? Because we know that Emmett Till came from Chicago. And okay, leave that there, right? So shout out to him for that, for paying that homage. But that was a direct migration line, so it makes sense to have that. But they're returning back to the Mississippi Delta, having worked for the likes of Al Capone and having caused their own trouble. It seems like they are on the run. So they come back and they want to set up shop back home. So that's what this is. This is a day in the life of what happens, to them when they come back. There are other characters that are there. We have a young man named Sammy. Sammy is the son of a preacher. He's played masterfully by Miles Caton. He's got this wonderful voice. There are a number of people in the cast who can actually sing. They're actually singers. And so he sings the songs throughout the film, and they end up on the soundtrack. Wonderful soundtrack. Go listen. So this is his breakout role, his first like debut major Hollywood film, and he was fantastic. I remember watching him and thinking that I felt the same way I did when I watched Jonathan Majors in The Last Black Man in San Francisco. I was just mesmerized, and all I could think is he is going places. Same thing with Kiki Lane and If Bill Street Could Talk. I just this way I was like, wow, this person is going to go really far. And so definitely pay attention to him as Sammy. He plays this blues playing son of a preacher man, which is a common story at this time. And what I really like about what Coogler is doing in this film is he's telling Black stories, and Sammy's story was not uncommon at the time. Blues emerges at this time, and it's actually Black women who put blues on the map, but it emerges at this time as a way for Black people to express themselves outside of the Christian tradition, right? To be able to use this music and have it, but also invoke their African tradition, the backbeat, the drums, the sounds, the banjo comes from Africa. Like they're able to bring these elements and not have it just be about worshiping God, right? But there was always this conflict between the secular and the non-secular, and people wanting folks to stay close to God because God got us through, right? Got us through the slavery. So here we are now. We need to stick to God, and God will get us to freedom. but other people found that there were other paths to freedom and their own personal liberation. And often playing music and the blues was a way for that to happen. So you have this young man, Sammy, trying to figure out his next move. He is very much inspired by his cousins, the Stack brother, I mean, Smokestack brothers. And he's, mesmerized by they've been all around the world. They've been to Chicago. They're coming back with these fancy suits and all this money in their pocket. And, he wants that life, right? He wants to get out of the Delta and he sees music as a way out, right? But then we have this narrator who lets us know, kind of sets the tone that there are people in different cultures who are able to use music to conjure spirits, to connect us to another realm, to take us and transport us to different places, right? And what that narrator does and what Coogler does brilliantly is he lets us know that one, music is its own character in this film. Please understand that the music in this film is its own character. But he also makes it clear that we trace a lot of our cultural heritage and memory through music. Again, we are an oral people. Our histories are oral. We often put them into songs and we pass them down. And he is a reminder that music has always been there for us. Music has always guided us. Music has always been a part of who we are as a people. And so when you're listening to the music in this film, it's really important to remember that the music is its own character, right? So we have the Stack Brothers, we have Sammy, we have music, we have Saul Williams, wonderful, playing the preacher, the Sammy's father. Saul Williams, I grew up with him, a wonderful spoken word artist. Happy to see him acting. He was great in this film. We have Wunmi Mosaku. You'll recognize her. She plays Annie. You'll recognize her if you saw Lovecraft Country. And I'm so glad that she got to do this film because Lovecraft Country is really a Eurocentric rendering of things. And we're just gonna I'll leave that there. I may do another podcast or something on that. But this is a Black film. This is us. And I'm so glad that she got to show up in this space here. So Annie is a hoodoo practitioner. She is the mother of Smoke's child. That baby died. We don't know if they were married. They never said, but they are very much in love with each other. She has given him and his brother protection. You see it like she gives him a mojo bag. The hoodoo representation is super, super important for Black Southern Gothic because it is so much a part of us. And there's that spirituality that I found it incredibly ironic that this film came out, like on the high holiest weekend of the Christian tradition. You've got Good Friday, you've got Easter Sunday, and here comes this film which I'll get into later, totally disrupts everything about Christianity's hold on Black people. But we got to see this woman, Annie, kind of representing that hoodoo culture. She is conjuring, she is creating bags and spells and putting blessings and things like that on folks. And this is accepted. It is not seen as abnormal. It is a part of who we are. And that is from an African cosmology perspective. Like we have always embraced the supernatural as part of who we are as a people. We have always had a direct connection to the ancestral realm. This film definitely blurs the line and reminds us that we are not alone as human beings on this earth. We are also supported by our ancestors who are in this realm, and they're always looking out for us. There is you would probably read it as a grave marking for their daughter, but it's not. It's an altar. There is milk there, right? There's a staff there that acts as a beacon. Her handprint is there. That is a way that she can always come home to mama and papa and be there, right? And so that is important. It's not unlike the film Coco, if you saw where the Mexican folks have, their altars to their ancestors. And if you don't remember them, then they get lost, right? Again, everything comes from Africa, right? Like indigenous folks get mad at me when I point this out. I'm like, you came from Africa, right? Of course you brought this over here. I'm just saying, like this is what it is, right? Um, and and you'll see it in Asian folks as well. I'm like, that's because y'all from Africa. Cultural memory never dies. It may change over time and may morph into other things, but that cultural memory never dies. And ancestral veneration is important to all of these groups. So, and that comes from Africa. All right. So you have Annie. Then you have who else do you have? You have Perlene. Perlene is played by this young woman, Jamie Lawson, and she's a fantastic singer. She sings a lot of the songs on, some of the songs on the soundtrack as well. She beautiful brown skin woman, and I'm pointing out her brown skin because I love that Ryan Coogler put dark skinned people in this film. The majority of the people in this film are dark skinned, and unfortunately, when people make films about Black people, especially when they have men and women together, they almost always guarantee that the woman is either not Black or she is a lighter skinned Black woman. And her being lighter skinned has nothing to do with the story, so she didn't have to be lighter skinned. He cast dark skinned Black people with intention, and it is beautiful. And it is a way of showing that, first of all, this is who we are, and we find beauty in who we are. And he's countering the colorist narrative of Hollywood, because Hollywood is extremely colorist, and it really pisses me off how many Black people go along with it, right? So she's there. She's again a breakout performance for her. That was wonderful. And then you have Delroy Lindo, who plays Delta Slim, and I if I'm talking about, thinking nominations for various awards, what have you, I see Woonmi getting one for Best Supporting Actress for playing Annie because she was the heart and soul of this film. And I see Delroy Lindo getting a look for playing Delta Slim. That's if they don't completely overlook this film because it's horror, right? They'll probably do it and use that as an excuse. Anyway, Delroy Lindo, iconic actor. Um, Brings everything to these roles, even having a smaller role like Delta Slim. He represents that intergenerational connection that we have. You see him willing to sacrifice himself so that the younger people can survive. He knows that he has lived his life and he is willing to protect everyone to make sure that they can go on, particularly Sammy, who is the youngest of them. His focus is get the boy out of here because he understands that that boy represents the future of our people. Okay, that is who Sammy is in this film. Sammy absolutely represents the future of our people, right? And so everybody is kind of coming together to protect it. In some ways, you'll see when Smoke is talking to him and he's like, I don't want you to do this. I want you to, kind of get out here, do the right thing, don't get into any trouble like us. You are the future. And so everybody kind of, protects him in that way. So that was really great. Overall, I think the cast did a great job for what they were doing. It's so fun because, a lot of times you don't get an ensemble cast that seems like they have a whole lot of chemistry, but this group seemed like they really did. I really appreciated Lee Jun Lee. She plays Grace, she's an Asian woman who is married to and her husband, they're Chinese, and it's like her and her husband Bo. They have a daughter named was it Denise or Lisa or something like that? I can't remember. But like kind of she's bringing this Southern Asian woman, right? And so that's going to take me into my next segment. Right. Okay. So one of the important messages that Ryan Coogler is conveying here is that white supremacy is the enemy. It is a mutual enemy for all oppressed people, right? And he does this subtly, right? If you think of the marketplace scene where Smoke drives into town and he's looking to connect with Bo, his old running partner, he knows exactly where to go to get the things he needs to be able to turn this sawmill into a juke joint and kick their business off. So he goes to this Asian couple, this Chinese couple, and they have a grocery store on one side. And that store is next to a Mexican restaurant. There is a Jewish-owned store. I don't know if anybody noticed that the name of there was a Jewish name. And there's also a Black-owned businesses. All of these are on the same side. On the other side, where the white people shop, the Asian family also has another store. And so they have two stores that are operating and they are teetering on both sides. And for me, I kind of read that as this model minority thing in which Asian people have, came to this nation, were brought here either to build these railroads, right? They also suffered, the Japanese suffered the internment camps and the concentration camps that we created. but the Asian folks that have come here have had to navigate both sides. There's the solidarity with Black people. That was a shout out to that because we have a history of African American and Asian American people being in solidarity, especially through the Black Power movement. That was really important, and I'm glad he brought that in. But also this navigation and assimilation and having to work for white people. And so I just thought the setup of them having two stores on two different sides, one where the racialized people are shopping and one where the white people are shopping, but how they navigate through them, they just walk back and forth through them. I just thought that that was fantastic. I was like, okay, Ryan, okay. You say you cooking with grease here, buddy. You cooking with grease here. But Ryan is giving this, this statement that the only way to fight white supremacy is for all of us to be united and all of us to come together and have mutual understanding, mutual and build community, and that way we can fight against it, right? Because the whiteness is represented as these vampires. Now, I get to talk about fun stuff. All right, so they're spending their day picking up people, getting them together, rallying folks like they're going to build this juke joint and everybody in the community is going to come together and do this and they're going to have a wonderful time, right? And while they're doing this, we're learning more about the characters. It's one of the things that I think Ryan Coogler does really well is there's strong character development, there's a strong world building that is happening here. You are brought to this moment. And I like that it's focused, excuse me, on one day. That is super important because sometimes you can get really messy, try to go over weeks and times and months and stuff like that, and you can lose a lot. Focusing on one day allows him to focus and get these messages out and keep it, succinct and powerful. All right, so they're all coming together and they're building this thing or what have you. And then we're seeing that there's something between the Smokestack twins. They're different, right? And I really, really appreciate. Um, so I'm just going to put it out there, just my own thoughts. I could be 100% wrong. But I think that Smoke and Stack represent the ways that we try to create a dichotomy between our leaders, right? If you think of W.E.B. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington, if you think of Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King, right? Somehow we get caught up in setting these men up as opposites or foes or things like that. And the truth of the matter is they were more alike than they were different. Two sides of the same coin. All of them had the same goals, right? And that was to elevate Black people. But their methods may have been different, their approaches may have been different, but they were the same people, right? And so I really loved how that seemed to play out, right? And what's really interesting is you notice that Smoke generally wears blue and Stack usually wears red. I thought that was a throw to Detroit Red, which was Malcolm X's middle name. And the reason that solidified for me was there was a line where they said, back when you were selling ass in Little Rock, and we know that one of Malcolm X's previous um, career choices was functioning as a pimp in kind of the prostitution thing. And so him wearing red, I thought was a throw to Detroit Red. And I just thought that that was pretty cool. Smoke wearing blue is more like this very straight-laced kind of cool person. And that's how we would see Du Bois and that's how we would see Martin Luther King, the ones that were more formally educated, these graduating, these PhDs and all that kind of stuff, more business minded, more focused on that. Whereas Malcolm had more of the like revolutionary spirit. Washington had more of the like we will lift ourselves up, right? Kind of spirit. And so I just thought that he was playing a little bit with that, but also challenging us to knock it off, right? Because in the line where Stack is dying, Smoke says he's the best part of me, and so kind of remembering that like these are the same people. These are two sides of the same coin and that there is no one without the other, which is a broader commentary like for Black people, like knock it off. Stop with all of the division and stuff like that. We are best with each other, even when we are different, even when we have different approaches, we have the same goal. We need to come together. So I thought that that was really potent how that plays out. And you can just kind of watch the film and see the subtleties in their personalities, how they engage with other people, et cetera, et cetera. Again, if you think I could just making shit up, what do I know? You know? So perhaps you will also see that. So I could be wrong. Anyway, so kind of going back to the cultural elements of that, right? So they're having their juke joint. They're having an amazing time. Everybody's drinking. They ain't really making much money, but it is what it is. Everybody's having a great time. They're all there, and the drinking, liquor's pouring, music's flowing, and then there's a scene where Sammy sings a song called I Lied to You. And remember when I said that the music is also a character? I strongly recommend you go listen to both the soundtrack. Ludwig Göransson just, I mean, blacked out on this soundtrack. I've been listening to it nonstop. Um, Go listen to the soundtrack and you'll understand what I'm saying, but also go listen to the score because the music is truly, its own character here. But he's doing this song called I Lied to You. And as he's doing it, our narrator comes back, and our narrator wants to guide us through this because the narrator is not confident that you're going to pick up what Ryan Coogler is putting down. And so the narrator comes in and starts giving us this historical lesson on the threads that flow through our music. And so you're seeing you're seeing Sammy playing this guitar, but then you're also seeing like someone playing a banjo, and then you're also seeing someone playing electric guitar. And the image, he's talking about the past and they're talking about the future. So you have characters who are dressed in traditional, like West African and Sub-Saharan African clothing. We see a Maasai mask, you see all kinds of things, right? And the drums are there, and they are like taking us again, this backbeat, this backbone, right? Um, Interesting, the soul of Black folks, right? Speaking of Du Bois. And so there's this cross diasporic, intergenerational kind of connection in this moment that he's bringing together here. And so you see him, he puts his foot up on the stage and he's playing his guitar, and next to him is someone who can be interpreted as a Sun Ra type or George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic, kind of representing that Afro future, right? So this film does have Afrofuturistic elements into it. And so they're playing this music as well, kind of showing that symmetry. This is where it all comes from. We have never lost it. It has always been in us, and it is inherently African. And so you see these different groups of people, and they're dancing and they're singing and performing. So it kind of pans to this group of women, and one of the women is doing a traditional African dance, and another woman is twerking, kind of showing, yes, this is where this comes from. This is all connected. Then you have clusters where there are hip hoppers, right? And so the hip hoppers, the b-boys are dancing, but they're also next to dancers who are doing traditional dances from various African nations. And it's really like, I mean, the symmetry of all of it. There was some parts where I was just like, all right, there were some parts I felt where he was like, message, message, message. And there was other parts where I was like, oh, you could have played this up a little bit more. I wanted to see more from the Crumpers because Ryan Coogler is from Oakland and Crumping. And he had the Seawalkers. He had like the people, doing crip walks and things like that. But also he had Crumpers and Crumping as a dance, of liberation, that was really important. But then he's right next to these African dancers doing similar dances, saying that we did not pull this out of nowhere, right? And that's important. Oh, and I just want to go back really quickly and talk about the blue and the red, Crips and Bloods, right? Unity, right? Kind of, you're twins, you're the same people. Why are you fighting? Right? That kind of thing. Pick it up. All right. So anyway, they're dancing. And there's a wonderful image there that I don't know if a lot of people caught it. It's this image here, right? It is Ernie Barnes' Sugar Shack. And I remember watching this and I was thinking, again, so I watched it the first time and I had some questions. I wrote down some notes and I went back to see it a second time. I said, I'm going to pay more attention. I'm going to try to pick up because it's very clear that he is paying homage to so many things, right? And so there is a scene that is in this juke joint where they're dancing where it does look like he might be replicating this Ernie Barnes painting. A couple of the people, the clothing that they're wearing, that's what kind of took me off. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That looks familiar. And so black, filmmakers, cinematographers and stuff like that, they tend to do that. They tend to pay homage to black visual artists in these ways. And so I wasn't surprised to see that. I could be totally wrong. I could be just making this up, but it's what I saw. And so we see that, and there's this, it reminded me also, if you've read James Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain, there is a scene in there, it's a few pages long, in which the protagonist is experiencing kind of the spiritual trance, but it's also kind of it reads almost like a orgasm. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. So this kind of idea of the connection between sexuality and spirituality that has always kind of been present among African people, and why our music kind of resonates so physically with us, because it is kind of this physical, pleasurable experience. And so we have a whole scene, and then there's these thumping that kind of represents this heartbeat and this pulse, and everybody's getting worked up. Everyone is sweaty, right? If you think of what was it, Matrix Revolutions, I believe there was a scene there in the beginning that was very similar. It's kind of, conveying this trance, this spiritual awakening through sexuality that is present there. So that was also important. Okay, but I keep getting away from the point that I'm trying to make here. Okay. So they're at the juke joint and all this stuff happens, and then these three people come. So earlier we had seen that this guy shows up at these white people's home. He says that he's being chased by the Choctaw or by the Indians, and he needs their help. He sees that they have like a clan robe in the background, so he appeals to their whiteness, and they bring him in. And then we see the Indians come, the Choctaw come, and they're trying to warn this white woman, hey, did this guy come? Because they're like vampire hunters. And so she's like, no, whatever, blah, blah, blah. He's like, all right, then you on your own. We tried to tell you, right? There's like a lot of that theme, right? That we've been saying a lot. We tried to tell you, and they going about their business. So yes, this man who landed at their door, Remick, he is played by Jack O'Connell. Great job. Again, another one of the powerful singers on in this film. He comes in and he turns them to vampires. Okay, so anyway, fast forward, they show up at the door, and they've got their instruments in their hands, and they're playing their music. And here is a wonderful statement about the comparison between, because they had heard him singing and they heard Sammy singing, and they heard they experienced the spirituality of it. They heard the depth of it. Like, just black people just do things differently. We sing differently, we cook differently, we fuck differently. We are just different. And we have all the more flavor. And white people know this. You're watching and you know that shit. Anyway, they come and they're playing their music. Their music is not bad. They actually sound really good or whatever, but it ain't got the flavor of what's inside there. And so, they're kind of like, okay, that's cool, but they want to come in, and they're asking to be invited in. And, you niggas got to stop inviting people to the cookout. Ryan Coogler is telling you with this film, stop inviting these people in. Stop inviting them to the cookout. Stop inviting them into our black spaces where they come, because they do not have good intentions. Okay. They recognize that we are cooler, we're more fun, we're more flavorful, and they want to experience it, but they don't just want to experience it to participate in it. They want to experience it because they want to steal it. And then they want to pass it off as their own. So their music is okay, but it's not that great. And so they're trying to get in, and they're prevented from coming in. So they're like, oh, well, we'll slowly walk away. And if you change your mind, blah, 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 blah. Fuck out of here. So, you know, Stack has this woman that he left behind. She is what they would call an octoroon at that time. Her maternal grandfather was half black. And at that time, the one drop rule, is what it is. But this is a woman who currently is passing as a white woman. She's got a white husband. She's moved on, but that's not who she wants to be. Her heart belongs to this black man, right? And kind of this commentary on just like blackness is not about how you look, because there's a lot of folks that look black that ain't black. Blackness is how you show up in your world and in your community. And she wants to be that. Like, she does not want to be in white society. She does not see that as a benefit or a privilege. She actually sees it kind of like being in jail. She does not want that. She wants to be at home with her people, right? And it's really important, very subtle if you don't pick it, because she talks about her mother. She don't say shit about her father. She's talking about her mother and how her mother took care and all these things like that, right? Because African people trace their lineage through their mothers. So that was really awesome. But anyway, she goes out to talk to them. She recognizes her skin privileges and she's like, well, I'm going to go talk to them and feel them out. She goes out there, as you might imagine, they convert her. So she comes back in. She asked to be invited in. And I'll pause here and just say that they have the basic vampire lore in this film. They don't really deviate too much from it. Burned by garlic, can't be in the sun, cursed to walk the earth, filled with hatred and demons and all the kind of stuff like that. And they need a stake through the heart. It's pretty simple. There's no day walkers here. Oh, they don't like silver. There's no day walkers here. There's no kind of special variation on a zombie kind of thing, or it's just standard vampire lore. So she asks to come in, he lets her in, and then she goes and she fast forward, she manages to attack Stack and kill him. And this is really one of the most important scenes of the film, right? This woman who once wanted to be part of this community is the person who, because Stack, falls in love with her and has aspirations of love with her, she's the one that takes him out. That is really important, folks. And they try to destroy her and they can't, right? So Smoke comes in, he's holding his brother as his brother is dying. And he tells them, he's like, the best part, he's the best part of me, like, what do I do? This is my brother. He's the best part of me. And it was a really, really touching moment. And, he's asking Annie, you ain't got no magic to bring my brother back. And she's like, no. But then Annie's starting to put two and two together. And she realizes that this is something else. She initially thinks it's a haint. And a haint is a spirit that kind of walks. This is a old African American hoodoo kind of thing. This idea of these spirits that kind of restless spirits that can either be antagonistic, they can be trickster, they can kind of just leave you alone or whatever. And when I first watched it, I was saying, well, she's talking about haints, but I ain't, where's her blue paint? Why? Because there is a color, a house color called haint blue, and that's because people would paint their doors blue to protect them from haints coming in. And then I watched it the second time, and sure enough, her house does have that blue paint over it. And that's the thing that I was looking for. These are the kinds of things that I was looking for the second time around, which lets me know that they took very good care to make sure that they were giving us these cultural elements, right? So she thinks it's a haint at first because that's what she knows. But then she realizes when Stack wakes up and kind of comes out, she throws pickled garlic at him and sees the way he reacts, and she's like, no, that's actually a vampire. So that's when they have to figure out like, what do we do here, right? And I thought it was interesting, like that she was able to come in and get one of the brothers and kind of break them apart in a way, right? And it was real, oh my gosh, it was so interesting because I just taught a module where I was talking about Fred Hampton and Stokely Carmichael, who we now know as Kwame Ture, and kind of their separation. And it's so interesting. I want you all to think about that, like go research them. But this idea of Stack and Smoke kind of going separate ways because once Stack has gotten the bite and he has this particular level of clarity, he's kind of like, it's better on this side. Why don't you come join me? Like, this is the path for us to be free. We're not going to be free here. And there's a lot of commentary from that. Um, there's a there's a couple of lines that come up in this scene that I think are really important. One is when the vampires come to the door and they're trying to come in, they realize now that this is what they are. They're vampires, and they can't come in if they haven't been invited in, right? Traditional vampire law. And Remick, who is kind of, the leader of the three, he identifies Sammy. Sammy is this griot, which the narrator introduces us to. He's got this power in his music playing. He is like a conduit. He is somebody who can connect us across things. And he says to him, he's like, I want your stories and I want your songs. And right there, that is the thesis of the film. It's like white people, whiteness seeks to absorb through being culture vultures everything that we have, our stories, our songs, because that way they can use them and turn them around and make themselves look better, right? That is the essence of Black cool. That is everything. If you think about all of the United States's most lucrative, cultural exports are things that were created by Black people, right? And then you've been running around looking for freedom, knowing damn well you wasn't gonna find it. And kind of speaking to like, so these two men are trying to they are looking for freedom. And there's a whole scene where Smoke is talking about, money is power. Power is the only thing that matters to these people, and you need money to have power. And kind of like this statement on Black capitalism, how we seem to think that if we could just buy our way to freedom, if we just make enough money, if we just get enough education, if we're just successful enough, then eventually we will be free. And it's like, no, you won't. You won't ever, because they will always be there trying to take what you have from you. And even when you have as much as they do, Oprah, they're still going to treat you like the N-word they believe that you are. Um, this idea that, Remick comes and says to them, and I just found this to be profound. He's telling them, he's like, this world has already left you for dead. And so he's coming, he's this Irish spirit, right? And he's coming and he's like, this world already left you for dead. But why are you fighting this? You can come with us and be on this side, and you can live forever, and you can have all the power in the world. Why wouldn't that be appealing to someone who comes from a line of people who have been subjugated for hundreds of years, right? So you see the wheels churning in Smoke's head, especially when he sees that his brother is on this other side. I really thought that that was fantastic. And so there's this really interesting statement on what freedom is and what does freedom look like and how do we go about it. Can white people actually give us freedom? No, they can't. They can offer this. But they're not in charge of our freedom. They don't own our freedom. It is within us. Liberation is within us, and we must liberate ourselves, right? And so Stack didn't choose that. It was forced upon him by this woman that is an eighth, an eighth Black. Again, but what I like about it, the actress, what was her name? Haley Steinfeld, like her actual cultural heritage is very, very similar. So I kind of liked that they did that. But the Irish commentary, and this is very personal to me, for those who know, they know. This idea that, when Irish people were coming to this country in the early 20th century, Irish and Italians, what have you, they were treated damn near the same way that Black people were treated, right? You would see signs that said, no Irish, no niggers, no dogs. Ooh, I'm not supposed to say that. Do you know what I'm saying? And they were treated in that same, they were not allowed to get housing, not allowed to set up businesses, not allowed to own land. They went through a lot of things. But then you got to read a book like How the Irish Became White, and you have to see that how folks, particularly from Eastern Europe, Polish, Irish, Italian, I'm from New York, the Italians came over, and the best way they found to stop being treated like Black people was to trade in anti-Blackness as a currency. And so that shift happened. A lot of them became police officers. A lot of them, became whatever. But their key to success was to trade in anti-Blackness. And so what Coogler is doing, though, is he's showing the similarities between their rich cultural heritage, because Irish people have a very rich cultural heritage. Of all the Europeans that have come to this country, I would say that Irish and Italian are like kind of ranked the highest in terms of the preservation of their ethnicity and their cultural heritage. English, nobody cares about that, right? Like, these people that like with their box blonde dye jobs, they don't know who they are. Well, I think my parents might be wild. My great grandparents might be wild. They don't know. They don't know their history any more than many African Americans don't, which is always ironic to me because people want to look and be like, oh, African Americans don't know where they're from. And I'm like, neither do white Americans. So there's that. All right. So um, so there's a scene where you have kind of this trance like dance scene and music and kind of going through history and things like that that is led by Sammy. But then you also have this a similar scene that is happening outside that is led by this Irish Remick, and he's singing. I think it's the Rocky Road to Dublin, which fantastic song. To me, the best two songs on the album. Well, the best three songs on the soundtrack are "I Lied to You," "Rocky Road to Dublin," and "Pale Pale Horse." He is singing this and he's doing dancing an Irish jig. And if you've ever watched Irish jigs, and the syncopation of that is very, very African in beat, right? They're probably the most on beat white people that exist, right? And so he's doing this Irish jig and people are kind of dancing around and are a part of that. And I was just like, wow. And it was mesmerizing. And he's also giving his cultural heritage. And there's a link there. There's a link. Ryan Coogler's like, don't forget, y'all used to be treated just like us. How dare you now be the racist bastards that you are, right? Like, there's a lot of calling out, there's a lot of indicting people. It's like, how dare you come here? We're the only ones that would take you in. We're the only ones that would serve you. And you're going to turn around and become cops and kill us and lock us up? Like, how dare you? And so I love that he kind of brought that like cultural element to it, but he's also kind of saying that it's like, again, we're more alike than we are different. But then he's also showing the appeal because the way that like Stack is kind of laughing about it and he's all like jovial and it's almost minstrelly the way that the black people are dancing. It's kind of giving minstrel show. He's also suggesting that, yeah, assimilating into that is probably not the best idea, black people, because it's just not the same and it ain't for you. Now, there were definitely some blaxploitation elements. I love talking about blaxploitation. I could talk about it all day, but I'm not going to do that here. I will just point out that Smoke and Stack could have easily been like John Shaft, Mac, Truck Turner, those kinds of figures and what they represent. For those who don't understand blaxploitation, the name comes from the idea of exploitation within film, which is basically when a film is really popular, a particular topic or trend, or it's making a lot of money, right, in the box office, people will jump on it and make similar films, just like that. We can look at all those beach movies, from the 60s that came out that were super popular. Not a whole lot of depth to them, but they made money. They got people to the theaters, right? So blaxploitation comes along and has a similar run. And blaxploitation really kind of saves Hollywood. They're making films, for like $500,000, but they're bringing in 10, 12, million dollars, which is a lot of money. So blaxploitation becomes a thing. But blaxploitation itself is not really a genre. It is a description of these kinds of films that came out. Each of those films, though, were different. We had horror, we had action, we had romance, we had these different types of films that came out. So but the common themes of these films were Black empowerment, Black liberation, sticking it to the man, fighting white supremacy, taking down corruption in the government and the police and things like that, resisting, kind of keeping Black spaces Black, celebrating, our cultural aspects and things like that. So there was some elements of that. And then there was, some parts of the film where they were dropping certain lines and it was just kind of funny and things like that. That's something that you see a lot in blaxploitation. Really just super, super black cultural elements that like some of which you gotta be black to get it, Like you kind of have to be that. And so there were some parts of that. I could also make the argument that there's like a spaghetti Western feel to this as well. If you think about Tarantino's Django and what he was trying to do, the racist piece of shit that he is, I could totally see Coogler doing his version of Django and making it a lot better than whatever that was. So there's a little bit of spaghetti Western to it. But again, I think that, you know, kind of looking at Southern Gothic, kind of looking at horror, kind of looking at all those elements together, the blaxploitation element, you kind of get that same feeling of the spaghetti Western. And the reason why they're called spaghetti Western is because Italian filmmakers were making these Westerns and they were kind of cheap and fun and a lot of people liked them. So the spaghetti Italian, now you get it. Okay. So, there's definitely that element. And I think that's important because blaxploitation to me is really one of the most important movements in Black cinema. Not only did it save Hollywood, because Hollywood was out on its ass, but it gave a lot of opportunity for some of our favorite people today, Nichelle Nichols, you know, uh, well, Isaac Hayes. I mean, well, his kid sucks, but Isaac Hayes and some folks, Yaphet Kotto. a lot of people kind of came out of that blaxploitation. Melvin Peoples, it was a thing. The other part that I just want to point out is that I saw someone saying this is the first time we've had this kind of like spiritual black cultural vampire film, and that is absolutely not true. Of course, I know that I know more because I study this stuff, but also I just wish people wouldn't make blanket statements because it's like you haven't really watched black films, and so again, that's kind of tied into the whole trauma porn thing. It's like you complain that there's too much black trauma porn, but you don't actually watch black cinema. You don't watch enough films to even make those kinds of statements. So there's a film called Ganja and Hess that came out, and that was during the blaxploitation era that absolutely explores these themes. And Spike Lee remade it with the Sweet Blood of Jesus, which is one of my favorite top five Spike Lee joints. So there's stuff that's out there. Blackula was talking about spiritual connection and taking it in and fighting racism and white supremacy and all this kind of stuff. Like Sugar Hill. I mean, God, I could name so many, and just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And so I hope that this film encourages you. I hope that my review of this film encourages you to go out and to actually watch more Black cinema and stop going on social media and complaining and talking about things you don't know. Oh gosh, there's so much. This is getting long. I know, and I'm glad if you're still here. Thank you for still being here because this film is really, really amazing. So there's just kind of one thing I just want to talk about, and that is the indictment on Christianity. Again, I think this is incredibly ironic that this film is um, that it is shown that it debuted on this high holy weekend because it is absolutely an indictment on Christianity's hold over Black people and the limitations of Christianity, how while recognizing that the Black church as an institution has been important to liberation work and things like that, it has also been incredibly limiting and it has held us back and it has been quite oppressive to us. And so we see that in the dynamic between Sammy and his father. Father wants him to get rid of, the devilish ways, that devil music and stuff like that, and excuse me, stay with the church. This idea of devil music, right? Black music being called devil music because it allegedly goes against what God wants, but this idea that they developed of God is products of white supremacy and white patriarchal supremacy. So the God that African people know, the gods that African people have appreciated have been removed and replaced by this oppressive, racist, violent God that sees us as less than whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Because the question always is, if God is real, then why did we have to suffer under enslavement by white people for all those centuries? Like, where was God? Why didn't God holler and be like, this is not cool. Stop, right? Kind of questions the omnipotence of God or even the mere existence of God, but allows for the fact that this spiritual connection, this belief, this faith system is still very much important to Black people. So he's not going to shit on it completely. But one of my favorite scenes is when, towards the end, Sammy is squaring off against Remick because Remick remember, he wants Sammy's songs and he wants his stories. um, he is forcing him into a baptism. He is dunking his head under the water several times, 3 times, I believe he does it. Somebody fact check me. And it really, to me, it represents the way that Christianity has been forced onto Black people. And we have been forced into submission and under the thumb of Christianity by these white patriarchal figures who have convinced us that this is what we need to do in order to survive and that this is better for us. But in the backdrop, Sammy had started reciting the Lord's Prayer as a protection. And so Remick also starts doing it. But then because Remick is doing it, all the vampires that he made, they're all falling in line and they're kind of walking like zombies, repeating and like reciting, I should say, the Lord's Prayer in this zombie-like state. And they're just like, Our Father who art in heaven. Like their eyes are glazed over. They're just marching towards their white leader. And I was like, God damn, Ryan. I was like, you put this out on Easter weekend? You let these niggas know that they are drones and they are blindly following this. religion that has been so destructive and has enslaved them for centuries and has been forced upon them through the forced baptism of, oh God, right? Yeah, that was great. I love that that was kind of how it rounded out. So I didn't necessarily get too deep into the technical aspects of the film. I could, but that's not really what you're here for. But it was a film that was recorded on film, and I think that that's really important when you're doing period pieces like this. It's almost 100 years ago, right? Especially Southern films, and definitely for a Southern Gothic film, it's great. You look at like again, remember I was talking about, the horror of the 70s and 80s and kind of that gritty kind of feeling. Something about it is a bit more authentic. So I appreciated that. But again, I did have some issues with some of the like editing and visual effect. I was kind of like, there were a couple of times I was like, not the choice I would have made. But again, I'm not a filmmaker, so who am I talking about? But and I think for some people that may be where they get caught up, but it doesn't really matter to me because I think that overall the film itself, it makes you not notice those things. Shout out to Ruth Carter, Academy Award winning costume designer. She was on top of things here. And again, I just want to shout out like Ludwig Göransson for being on the soundtrack and the score because again, the music was its own character and a well-developed one at that. And so you can't watch this without allowing for music to be another character in this particular film. Yeah, so did I like the film? I thought the film was great. I went and saw it 2 times within 24 hours. I rarely go back to see a film in the theaters. Last time I did that, I believe, was Endgame with the Avengers. I didn't have to do it with Book of Clarence because like it was on Prime like right after or whatever. But yeah, it's rare that I go back and watch a film again because I'm just like, oh my God, what did I miss? I was so enthralled by it the first time. I was taking some notes, but I was like, I gotta follow up on some of these questions that I had. So I went back to see it again. Highly recommend this film. Highly recommend if you've been nervous about going because it's all about horror. Trust me, the horror is actually quite minimal. There were no real jump scares or anything like that. Again, I'm a horror aficionado. There ain't nothing for you to be scared of in this film. This is a historical narrative. This is a Southern Gothic film. This is a message, call for liberation. This is Ryan Coogler kind of identifying the ways in which we need to free ourselves of the shackles of white supremacy. We need to return to the source. So much of this was about returning to the source, having a Sankofa moment. Like we need to go back to where it all began. We need to remember who we are before white supremacy and patriarchy came and tried to destroy us. We still have remnants of it. It is present in our cultural memory is strong. It's present in our music. The connection is there. We just need to go back and fetch it. And I think that that's what the message to Black people is. He's definitely celebrated our culture, our endurance, our resilience, but he's also offering a pathway forward. And I hope that people get that out of that. He is scathingly indicting white people and whiteness in this film. And I understand now why some of the reviews by mostly white men are saying that this film is bad. But shout out to the folks who got it. Well, you can't quite get it because you ain't me, you ain't us. So there's only so much you're gonna get. But I appreciate those who can appreciate it for the work of art that it is, even if you don't necessarily get all the subtext. I didn't go into everything here. Like I said, this is already long. I'm very interested in what you have to think. Drop in the comments some of your thoughts, whether you picked up some of the things that I did, whether you picked up some other things that I may have not talked about or maybe that I've missed. I love when we can have these cultural moments and come together and have these kinds of conversations. Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. I am coming back, you guys. I am a professor cinephile. I'm a professor. I teach. This semester got really busy, but the semester is almost over, and I have kind of committed this summer. This summer I'm going to be doing more blaxploitation videos about certain films. This summer, I am going to be teaching a class on Black exploitation through Sankofa Summer School, so I will have information for you about that. And I'm going to get back into this this film review back because I love this and I love how you all receive what I'm doing. So yeah, hit that like button, and yeah, I'll see you next time.